Even more to the point, we find this John Parker was very closely related to Mary Todd Lincoln. See below for full genealogical analysis. You should also find it strange that Walt Whitman is repeating this ridiculous story 14 years later, and that people are paying to come hear him recite it. Anyone with any sense should have been asking then, and should be asking now. Who is this guy, Whitman, that is repeating such an obvious lie, and doing it with such pompous flourishes? You should also be asking, why hasn't anyone ever contradicted this obvious lie? Not even Mark Twain, who should have had a field day with this. It is also worth looking at the owner and manager of Ford's Theater, John T. Ford. Not only did he own many prominent theaters north and south, he was a major industrialist and railroad tycoon, being president of the Union Railroad Company and a director of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. He was also involved in banking. We are told that after the event, Ford and his brothers were arrested as possible conspirators, spending 39 days in jail. But that is unlikely to be true. I suspect it was reported as diversion, to keep eyes off his real connections to the story. He was close to the Booths, and they spun that to make you think he might have been part of a Confederate conspiracy. But since we will see below that Booth is not who you thought, that is misdirection. Ford's ties to the Booths are important, but not for the reasons we have been sold. None of them were Confederate conspirators. Ford was a Baltimore elder, and Baltimore was in the North. In fact, the whole state had been under direct federal supervision since 1861 to prevent it from seceding. As a major capitalist not dependent on slavery or tobacco, Ford was part of the supervision, not part of the resistance. In 1865, the government bought the theater from Ford for $100,000, which is about $3,000 now. What we have seen already is a series of wildly flapping red flags, all of them pointing directly at a stand down, just as the military stood down on 9/11, failing to launch any jets or follow any normal protocol. Lincoln's guards stood down on April 14, 1865. But we already have evidence of far more than just a stand down. We have seen ridiculous theatrics from Booth, an actor. We have seen a staged event in a theater. We have seen reported events that simply could not have happened in any real-life situation, with none of these people acting like people normally act. As with the actors at Sandy Hook, we see people doing things that people simply do not do. In real life, Mrs. Lincoln would have screamed as soon as the first shot was fired, and would have yelled, "He has been shot," immediately. Booth could not have escaped from a crowded theater, guard or no guard. But he especially could not have escaped by jumping down onto the stage, breaking his leg, giving a speech, etc. Even in a nunnery, he would have immediately been mobbed, knife or no knife, but this was 1865 during a civil war. 50 men in the audience would have shot him or run him through with a sword before he could get the sick out of his mouth. Since none of it could have happened this way, we must assume it didn't. As with all these other manufactured events, what happened here happened only in a completely controlled environment. The prepared story was planted later, and a fair number of people were hired to tell stories to corroborate the event.